it was not necessarily what was being sold there. It was that the priests, the leaders there, they were heavily involved, and instead of them focusing on the celebration of the Passover, they was out there making money. So this was in essence why Jesus was so pissed off and why he was so angry and just went ballistic in destroying everything inside the temple. So that's where we at now, entering to verse 18. And so in verse 18 it says, the Jews then respond to him, what sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all of this? Because again, they were upset that Jesus came in, messing with their money, turning everything over. Jesus being, pissed off at what he was seeing, based on how the high priest, the leaders, how they were carrying on inside the temple. Instead of them focusing on the Passover, they was worrying about their money. Amen. So this was their part, and when Jesus did that, they wanted to know, who are you, basically? So the authority was questioned by the leadership that was there. And so Jesus, when coming into the temple, the part that threw them off was that the statement that Jesus said. Jesus made the statement of saying that his Father's house. Now, these leaders have never heard anyone talk like that. They never heard someone claiming the temple as their Father's house. So this is the reason why they said they wanted some kind of proof. Basically saying, basically, who do you think you are? So that was what, the high priest had, how they addressed Jesus. But this statement right here, right next to it, really threw them off at this point, really threw them off. In verse 19, Jesus said, and I answered them, destroy this temple, and I will raise it up again in 3 days. So they was really confused now. They're like, hold on, we just asked who you are, and then you want to talk about rebuilding the temple in 3 days? So this confused them, because the leaders, the high priests, they was thinking about the physical part. They was thinking about the physical part. They were thinking about the structure of the building. They know it took about 46 years for them to build a temple, and you going to rebuild it in 3 days? Because they're thinking about the natural. In verse 20, they replied, it have taken 46 years to build this temple, and you're going to raise it in 3 days? So they are really like dumbfounded with that response. Now, one thing that I want you to get an understanding when we talk about the book of John and the other 3 books leading up to the book of Acts with Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew emphasized Jesus, his fulfillment of the prophecy, and the importance of following Jesus' teachings. That's what the book of Matthew is. When you think about the book of Mark details Jesus' power and his authority as a healer and as a miracle worker. Now, when we look at the book of Luke, Luke dealt with Jesus' compassion and with the social justice matters that was going on. So when we look in the book of John, according to the book of John, John highlighted the spiritual significance of Jesus' life and his teachings. So according to the book of John, Jesus was focusing on spiritual things. Now, I know that you probably asked, well, in the New Testament, there are some things that's talked about that these disciples had experienced, but they given their own perception about what happened in that particular book. Same story, told differently, but told differently in the sense of how Jesus had approached it in their eyes. So again, Matthew focused on the prophecies of Jesus and his fulfillment, when Mark details Jesus' power and authority, and Luke talked about his perspective on Jesus' compassion. But John, the book of John, highlighted how Jesus looked at things spiritually in his teachings. Okay? So I want you to understand, as we continue to study the book of John, or you study the book of John yourself, what is the difference between the 4 books. And that's the breakdown between the 4 books. So we as people of God, especially leadership, because it starts with us. We have to start dealing with the church, not just physically. This is something that we have to start doing. Stop dealing with the church physically and look at the church spiritually, because if we continue to approach church in a physical manner and not the spiritual matter that it should be, we're going to miss God.